Honey, I made a copy of the apartment keys for you, my son Ryan said on his wedding anniversary, handing his wife Chloe the keys to my apartment, where I live, the apartment I inherited from my sister Margaret after caring for her for 5 years while she was dying of cancer. A few minutes later, I stood up from the table, my hands trembling but my voice firm, and announced in front of all the guests, "And now, my gift for my son and his wife." In that instant, the two of them were left completely speechless, because what I was about to reveal would destroy all their plans to steal my home and lock me in a nursing home as if I were trash. My name is Eleanor. I am 67 years old, and that night, I understood that my own son had conspired with his wife to take away everything I had left in this life. But what they didn't know, what no one at that table suspected, was that my sister Margaret had foreseen exactly this before she died, and she had left me something much more powerful than a simple apartment. She had left me the weapons to defend myself. That Saturday night began like any family celebration. They had reserved an upscale restaurant downtown, with ivory-colored tablecloths and aromatic candles on each table. Chloe wore an emerald green dress that probably cost more than $1,200, with jewelry that sparkled so much it nearly blinded me. My cousin Brenda was sitting across from me, with that smile that always made me nervous, that smile that hid years of envy and resentment. Ryan ordered French champagne for everyone. We toasted to love, to the 5 years of marriage, to family. I raised my glass, trying to ignore the feeling that something bad was about to happen. That feeling that tightens in your stomach, that makes you want to run, but that you ignore because you don't want to seem paranoid, because you want to believe that your son, the person you carried in your womb, whom you raised with love and sacrifice, would never hurt you. How wrong I was. After the toast, Ryan stood up. We all looked at him expectantly. He smiled in that way that used to melt my heart when he was a child, but now that smile seemed strange, rehearsed, as if he were acting in a play. He took Chloe's hand and said in a loud voice, so everyone could hear, "My love, these 5 years with you have been the best of my life. You are the most incredible woman I have ever met, and I want you to know that I will always take care of you, that you will always have a home with me." Everyone applauded. Brenda clapped louder than anyone. I applauded too, although something inside me screamed that this was not normal, that there was something wrong with his words. Then Ryan reached into the pocket of his gray suit jacket and pulled out a small, cream-colored envelope. He opened it slowly, dramatically, as if it were the most important moment of his life. And from that envelope, he pulled out a set of keys. Keys that I recognized immediately, because they were identical to mine. The keys to my apartment. "Honey," he said, looking intently at Chloe, completely ignoring that I was sitting just 2 meters away, "I made a copy of the apartment keys for you, so you'll always have a place to land, so that place can be ours." The silence that followed was deafening. I felt as if someone had hit me in the chest with a hammer. Ours. That apartment was mine. It was the only thing I had left of Margaret, of the years we spent together, of the sleepless nights caring for her, cleaning her wounds, holding her hand while she cried in pain. That apartment had the walls she painted, the furniture she chose, the photographs of our childhood, and my son had just gifted it to his wife, as if it were any other object, as if I didn't exist, as if I were already dead. Chloe took the keys with a triumphant smile. Her eyes shone in a way that chilled my blood. Brenda was clapping and laughing, saying, "What a beautiful gesture, Ryan. What a generous husband." And I just sat there, petrified, feeling my world collapse while everyone celebrated my destruction. But then I remembered Margaret's words on her deathbed. I remembered the letter she left me. I remembered everything she had prepared for this exact moment. And I knew it was time to act. I rose slowly from my chair. Everyone turned to look at me. Ryan looked uncomfortable, like a child who knows he did something wrong but hopes to get away with it. Chloe looked at me with contempt. Brenda with malicious curiosity. "What an interesting gift," I said in a calm voice, although inside my heart was pounding as if it would explode. "Now, it's my turn. I also have a gift for you." And in that moment, everything changed. If you have ever been betrayed by the people you love most, if you have ever felt that the whole world is conspiring against you, then you will understand exactly what happened next. Because what I was about to reveal would not only save my life, but would expose a conspiracy that had been brewing in the shadows for months. A conspiracy to steal my home, my dignity, and my freedom. But before I tell you how I unmasked them, you need to understand how we got here. You need to know the story of Margaret and me. Because only then will you understand why what I did that night was the only option I had left. Margaret was 8 years older than me, and for as long as I can remember, she was my protector, my second mother, my best friend. We grew up in a small town in the Midwest, in a modest house with thin walls and a dirt yard where Margaret planted orange geraniums that bloomed even on the hottest days. Our parents worked from dawn until dusk, Dad in construction and Mom cleaning houses for wealthy families. So Margaret, at barely 10 years old, took on the role of caring for me. She would comb my hair before school, braiding it with pink ribbons she kept like treasures. She taught me to read before I even started first grade, sitting under the big oak tree in the yard, using her finger to follow each word in books borrowed from the public library. When other children made fun of my patched clothes, Margaret would appear like an avenging angel and silence them with just a look. "Nobody touches my little sister," she would say with that firm voice that allowed no argument. Our family was small but close, or so I thought. Because we had our cousin Brenda, my mother's sister's daughter, who lived in the big city and came to visit us twice a year with her elegant clothes and superior airs. Brenda was always envious of Margaret, envious of her natural beauty, her intelligence, the way everyone in town respected her. Margaret didn't need expensive dresses or costly makeup to shine, and that drove Brenda crazy. I remember one summer afternoon, I must have been about 12, when Brenda arrived for a visit in a lilac-colored dress and high heels. She sat in our small living room and began to talk about her wonderful life in the city, the parties she attended, the important men who courted her. Margaret listened in silence while peeling potatoes for dinner, and when Brenda finally asked her in a mocking tone, "And you, Margaret, still here taking care of your little sister and living in this dump?" My sister just smiled and replied, "I live where my family is, Brenda, and that's worth more than all your fancy dresses." Brenda never forgave her for that answer. She never forgave Margaret for having something she could never buy, genuine dignity. The years passed, and Margaret fulfilled her dream of becoming an elementary school teacher. She worked hard, studied at night, saved every penny she could. I married young, perhaps too young, to a man who turned out to be more irresponsible than loving. I had Ryan when I was 23 years old, and my husband abandoned us when the boy was barely 4 years old. He disappeared one January pre-dawn, leaving nothing but debts and broken promises. And who showed up at my door that very week? Margaret, with 2 suitcases and a smile that tried to hide her worry. "I came to help you with Ryan," she said, as if it were the most natural thing in the world, as if she hadn't left her own apartment in the city, her stable job, her comfortable life, just to rescue me from my disaster. She moved in with me for 2 full years. She cared for Ryan as if he were her own son, helped me find a job as a secretary at a dental clinic, taught me to be strong when I just wanted to give up. Ryan adored his Aunt Margaret. He called her Aunt Meg and would run to hug her every time she came home from work. She read him stories before bed, helped him with his homework, took him to the park on Sundays. She taught him values that I, sunk in my depression and exhaustion, didn't have the strength to instill. She taught him about respect, honesty, the importance of family. "Real men protect the women they love, Ryan," she would tell him while he sat on her lap. "They don't abandon them. Promise me you'll never be like your father." And Ryan would promise. My little boy with big eyes and a sweet smile would promise he would always take care of me, that he would never leave me alone. "When I grow up, I'm going to work hard and buy you a huge house, Mom," he would say with that innocence only children have. And I believed him. Margaret believed him. Because that child had a pure heart. What happened to that child? At what point did he become the man who betrayed me in that restaurant? Margaret never married. She dedicated her life to teaching and to us. She saved every cent for 30 years, living modestly, without unnecessary luxuries. When she turned 55, she was finally able to buy her dream. A small but beautiful apartment in a quiet building in the city. 2 bedrooms, a balcony overlooking a park, hardwood floors that creaked when you walked barefoot. She decorated it with plants, photos of our childhood, and a collection of books that covered an entire wall. It was her sanctuary, her greatest achievement. Eleanor. She told me the day she signed the property papers, her eyes shining with happiness. This place will be yours someday. Because you are my family, my sister, my whole life. Everything I have is yours. I cried that day. I cried because I knew I didn't deserve such a generous, selfless sister. Brenda was present at the celebration, with her forced smile and empty congratulations. I watched her observing every corner of the apartment with calculating eyes, mentally calculating the value of everything. I already knew then that she was up to something, but I didn't imagine how much hatred she held in her heart. 5 years after that celebration, Margaret began to feel sick. Stomach pains she ignored, fatigue she attributed to work. When she finally went to the doctor, the diagnosis was devastating. Advanced, stage pancreatic cancer. The doctors gave her 6 months to live, maybe a year if she responded well to treatment. I quit my job immediately. Ryan was an adult by then. He was 28 years old and worked at a tech company with a good salary. "Go take care of Aunt Meg," he told me, hugging me tightly. "I'll help you financially. Don't worry about anything." And he did. For the first 3 months, Ryan sent me $1,200 every month to help with medical expenses and food. I moved into Margaret's apartment to care for her 24 hours a day. It was 5 years of hell and love mixed together. 5 years watching her slowly deteriorate, her strong body turning to skin and bones, her hair falling out from chemotherapy, her smile growing weaker every day. But also 5 years of deep conversations, of shared laughter on good days, of hugs that said more than 1,000 words. Brenda appeared occasionally, always with excuses for why she couldn't stay long, always looking at the apartment like a vulture waiting for its prey to die. "Have you made a will, Margaret?" she would ask with false concern. "You should think about the family, about dividing things equally." Margaret would silence her with a look that could freeze hell. It was during those years that Ryan met Chloe, a beautiful woman in appearance, with long brown hair and a way of speaking that seemed educated and refined. She worked in public relations for an international firm, wore designer clothes, and always had the right answer for every situation. At first, I liked her. She seemed to make my son happy, and that was all that mattered. But Margaret saw her differently. "That woman has snake eyes," she told me one night as I was giving her medicine. "I don't trust her, Eleanor. There's something fake about her smile." I told her she was being too harsh, that Chloe was just a modern, ambitious girl. Margaret shook her head sadly. "I hope I'm wrong, little sister. I hope I'm wrong." She was never wrong. Everything began to change 3 months before Margaret died. Ryan's deposits became irregular. From $1,200 a month, they dropped to $200, then $300, until they stopped coming altogether. When I called him to ask what was wrong, he always had a different excuse. Problems at work, unexpected expenses, the wedding they were planning with Chloe was costing more than anticipated. "Mom, you need to understand that I have my own life too," he told me one afternoon on the phone, in a tone he had never used with me before, cold and distant. "I can't support you forever. You've been out of work for 5 years. Those words hurt me more than any physical blow. Supporting me? I wasn't on vacation. I was taking care of the woman who had raised him, who had loved him like a mother, who had taught him every good thing he ever had. I was sacrificing my health, my savings, my future, so that Margaret wouldn't die alone and abandoned in some cold hospital, and my son called it supporting you." Margaret overheard that conversation. She was so weak she could barely get out of bed, but her eyes were still sharp, perceptive. "It's her," she whispered in a broken voice. "Chloe is poisoning him against you. She's pulling him away from his family." At first I didn't want to believe it. I made excuses to justify Ryan's behavior. "He's stressed about the wedding," I told myself. "He's under a lot of pressure at work." But then the strange visits began. Brenda started showing up at the apartment more frequently, but never alone. She always brought Chloe with her. The two would arrive together, sit in the living room, and talk in low voices while looking around as if they were appraising every object, every piece of furniture, every inch of the place. When I entered the room, they would fall silent abruptly and smile at me with that falseness that makes your skin crawl. "We just came to see how Margaret is doing," Brenda would say with sickly sweetness. And to keep you company, cousin. It must be so hard for you to be here alone, without help, without money. The way she pronounced those last words, without money, sounded like a veiled threat. Chloe watched everything with those calculating eyes that Margaret had identified from the start. She took pictures of the apartment with her phone, supposedly to show Ryan how everything is, but I knew there was something more. I saw her counting the rooms, mentally measuring the spaces, casually asking about the building's value, about whether Margaret had life insurance, about what would happen to the apartment when she died. "Have you thought about your future, Eleanor?" Chloe asked me one afternoon, while Brenda checked Margaret's medications with false interest. "You're going to need a place to live when this is all over. Ryan and I have been talking, and we think maybe you could move into a senior living facility. There are some very nice ones, with nurses and everything. You'd be much happier there than alone in a big apartment." I was 62 years old at the time. I was not a decrepit old woman who needed to be locked away in a nursing home. But the way Chloe said it, with that condescension disguised as concern, made me understand that she had already made decisions about my life without consulting me. I told Margaret everything that night. She could barely speak anymore. The cancer had spread to her lungs. But she gathered all her strength to tell me. "Listen to me closely, Eleanor. Don't let them take this apartment from you. It's yours. I've left everything arranged. Promise me you'll fight." "I promise," I told her as tears streamed down my cheeks. She closed her eyes, exhausted from the effort of speaking, and I just sat there next to her bed, holding her hand, which no longer had any strength. 2 weeks later, Margaret died. It was a Sunday morning, with the sun streaming through the window and illuminating her face, which finally looked at peace. I was alone with her, as we had been for all those years. Ryan arrived 3 hours after I called to tell him, and when he entered the apartment, he came with Chloe and Brenda, all three together, like a unit. He didn't hug me. He didn't cry. He just looked at Margaret's body on the bed and said in a mechanical voice, "We need to make the funeral arrangements." Chloe put her hand on Ryan's shoulder in a gesture of support that seemed more possessive than loving. Brenda immediately started rummaging through drawers and closets under the pretext of looking for important documents. The funeral was small. Margaret didn't have many friends outside of her former students and some neighbors. Brenda took charge of organizing everything, which I found strange because she had never shown much interest in Margaret when she was alive. But there she was, directing everything as if she were the closest relative, talking to the funeral director, choosing the cheapest casket despite my wanting something better for my sister. "It makes no sense to spend so much money on a dead person," Brenda said when I protested. "Margaret would have wanted something simple." Liar. Margaret had spent her whole life saving, working hard to have some dignity, and this woman wanted to bury her in the cheapest casket as if she were trash. During the wake, I heard conversations I wasn't supposed to hear. I was in the bathroom when Brenda and Chloe entered the hallway right outside, not knowing I was there. Their voices cut through the thin door. "Did you talk to the lawyer?" Chloe asked urgently. "Yes, but he says we have to wait for the official reading of the will," Brenda replied in frustration. "Although it doesn't matter. Margaret had no one but Eleanor, and she doesn't have the legal capacity to manage a property. She's too old, too emotional. We can argue she's not in the mental state to administer the apartment, and Ryan agrees. Ryan does whatever you tell him to do, dear. You just have to keep convincing him that his mother needs special care. He already halfway believes she's losing her mind." They laughed. The two of them laughed as if they were planning something fun, not destroying the life of a woman who had just lost her only sister. I stayed paralyzed in that bathroom, my hands trembling, feeling the rage and fear mix in my chest, creating a knot that barely let me breathe. I left the bathroom 5 minutes later, after they had gone. I approached Margaret's casket and spoke to her in silence. "I'm not going to let them win. I promised you, and I will keep that promise." The following days were a nightmare. Ryan practically disappeared from my life. He didn't answer my calls, didn't reply to my messages. When I finally managed to speak with him, he sounded like a stranger. "Mom, you need to understand that things are going to change. You can't keep living alone in that big apartment. It's dangerous for a woman your age. Chloe and I are looking for a suitable place for you, a place where you'll be safe and cared for." I don't need to be cared for, Ryan. I'm perfectly fine. Mom, be realistic. You're 62 years old. You don't work. You have no savings. What are you going to do? What am I going to live on? That apartment is worth a lot of money. We could sell it and use that to pay for a very good facility for you for years. That apartment is mine. Your aunt left it to me. That remains to be seen, he said in a tone that chilled my blood. The will hasn't been officially read yet. He hung up. My own son hung up the phone while I was crying on the other end of the line. I couldn't sleep that night. I lay awake staring at the apartment ceiling. The ceiling Margaret had painted cream so the light would reflect better, thinking of all the time she had told me this place would be my refuge when she was gone. And now my son, the boy she had helped raise, wanted to snatch it from me. But then I remembered something. 3 weeks before she died, Margaret had given me a thick manila envelope and made me promise not to open it until after her funeral. When the time comes, she told me, you'll know what to do with this. I got out of bed, went to the closet where I had stored the envelope, and opened it with trembling hands. Inside were legal documents, a letter written in Margaret's shaky handwriting, and something else, a small voice recorder. I began to read the letter, and with every word, I felt hope return to my heart. Margaret's letter began with words that made me cry before I even finished the first paragraph. My dearest Eleanor, if you are reading this, it means I am no longer with you. Don't cry for me, little sister. I had a life full of love thanks to you. But now I need you to be strong, because I know exactly what is going to happen after my death, and I've left you the tools to defend yourself. My hands trembled so much I could barely hold the paper. I continued reading, my heart racing. 6 months ago, when I could still walk without help, I went to Ryan's apartment to bring him a meal I had prepared. I rang the doorbell, but no one answered, so I used the spare key he had given me years ago for emergencies. I went in, thinking maybe he was in the shower or wearing headphones, but what I heard broke my heart. Ryan was in the living room talking on the phone, and his words froze me in the hallway. I sat down on the floor, unable to keep standing as I read what came next. No, Brenda, I can't tell my mom that yet, Ryan was saying in frustration. It's too soon. First, I have to convince her that Aunt Margaret would be better off in a hospital, that she can't take care of her properly on her own. There was a pause, and then he continued. Yes, I already talked to Chloe. She says that as soon as Aunt Margaret dies, we can argue that Mom isn't mentally fit to live alone. She's over 60. She doesn't work. She spends all her time caring for a terminally ill patient. Any judge will agree that she needs supervision. Another pause. The apartment is worth at least $300,000. If we sell it and put Mom in a cheap facility, we'll have over $200,000 left to split. You take your share as a direct relative, and Chloe and I will use the rest for the down payment on our house. I dropped the letter. The world was spinning around me. My son, my boy, the baby I breastfed, whom I cared for when he had a fever, whom I taught to walk holding his little hands. That same boy was planning to lock me in a cheap nursing home and steal my home to buy a house with his wife. But the letter continued. I didn't run out as I should have. I stayed hidden in the hallway, and I recorded the entire conversation with my phone. I have 48 minutes of audio where Ryan, Brenda, and Chloe plan every detail of how to take the apartment from you, how they will convince a judge you are unwell, how they will forge medical reports if necessary. I have it all, Eleanor. Every word, every cruel laugh, every derogatory comment about you. Tears fell onto the paper, blurring some of the words, but I kept reading desperately. I went immediately to my lawyer, Arthur Miller. I told him everything and showed him the recordings. He helped me protect the apartment in a way they will never be able to break legally. The apartment now belongs to an irrevocable trust. You are the lifetime beneficiary and the sole administrator. No one, absolutely no one, can sell it, force you to leave, or make decisions about that property without your explicit, notarized consent. Not even if they had you declared mentally incapacitated, because the trust has clauses that protect it from those kinds of maneuvers. I couldn't believe what I was reading. Margaret, even while dying, even in so much pain, had used her last strength to protect me. Furthermore, the letter continued. I left very specific instructions. If Ryan, Brenda, or Chloe try any legal action against you, Arthur has authorization to release the recordings publicly and press charges for conspiracy to commit fraud. I also left a video, Eleanor. A video where I explain everything I discovered, where I show the proof, where I tell them exactly what I think of them. Arthur has it saved and will show it at the right moment. The recording device in this envelope contains copies of all the conversations. Listen to them when you're ready. They are painful, I know, but you need to know the whole truth. You need to understand who you are fighting against. I love you, little sister. I always loved you. You were the best part of my life. Don't let them destroy you. You are stronger than you think. And remember, revenge isn't about stooping to their level. It's simply not allowing evil to win. Your sister who adores you eternally, Margaret. I sat on the floor for hours, clutching that letter to my chest, crying for the sister who knew me better than anyone, who had foreseen everything, who had saved me even from her grave. Finally, I gathered the courage to pick up the recording device and press play. Ryan's voice filled the room, and every word was a stab. Mom is too attached to Aunt Margaret. It's unhealthy. She needs psychiatric help, but she's never going to accept it on her own. We have to force the situation. Then Brenda's voice. Once we have the apartment, we can sell it quickly. I know a developer who's buying up the whole building for luxury condos. He'd give us $350,000 in cash, no questions asked. And finally, Chloe, with that sweet voice she used in public, but which here sounded venomous. Ryan, honey, your mother had her chance at life and wasted it by marrying a loser. It's not your responsibility to support her until she dies. She made bad decisions. Let her suffer the consequences. We deserve that house in the suburbs. We deserve to start our family in a nice place, not sacrifice our future for an old woman who never did anything productive with her life. I turned off the recording. I couldn't listen anymore. The Ryan who spoke on that recording was not my son. He was a stranger. A monster created by two manipulative, ambitious women who had found his weaknesses and exploited them until he became someone unrecognizable. The next day, I called the lawyer, Arthur Miller. He was a man of about 70 years, with completely gray hair and kind eyes that moistened when he saw me enter his office. Mrs. Eleanor, he said, taking my hands in his, Margaret spoke a great deal about you. She made me promise to protect you. And that is exactly what I am going to do. He showed me all the documents. The trust was impenetrable. Margaret had invested her last savings, almost $15,000, in creating a legal structure that no corrupt lawyer could dismantle. The apartment was in my name within the trust, but with so many protections that it was practically impossible for anyone to take it from me. And the video Margaret mentioned? I asked in a shaky voice. Arthur took a USB drive from his drawer. It's right here. Margaret recorded it 2 weeks before she died. She made me swear I would only show it if Ryan, Brenda, or Chloe attempted any legal action against you, or if you decided the time had come to confront them. I want to see it, I said with a determination I didn't know I had. Arthur played it on his computer. There was Margaret, emaciated, bald from chemotherapy, connected to oxygen tubes, but with her eyes burning with rage and love. She spoke for 20 minutes. She explained the recordings, showed documents, called Ryan, Brenda, and Chloe by their full names, and accused them of conspiracy, manipulation, and cruelty. Her voice was weak but clear, and every word was chosen with legal precision. At the end of the video, Margaret looked directly at the camera and said, Ryan, I know you will see this someday, and I want you to know that I loved you like a son. But what you are planning to do is unforgivable. Eleanor gave you life, sacrificed everything for you, and you repay her by betraying her in the vilest way. I hope one day you recover the decency I taught you. But if you don't, may these words haunt you for the rest of your life. You destroyed your mother for money, and that makes you less than nothing. The screen went black. Arthur and I sat in silence for several minutes. When is the official reading of the will? I finally asked. In 3 weeks, Arthur replied. But I have something better. Ryan and Chloe are planning their wedding anniversary, aren't they? They're celebrating 5 years. Yes, I said, confused. How do you know? Brenda contacted me 2 days ago, Arthur said with a sad smile. She wanted to know if the will had been executed, if you already had legal access to the apartment. She was in a hurry. I told her everything was in process, that it took time. She seemed satisfied and casually mentioned there would be a family celebration soon. I understood immediately. They're going to make their move at the anniversary. Exactly, Arthur confirmed. And I think we should make ours too. How about we give them a surprise? And that's how we began to plan my revenge. Not a cruel or violent revenge, but a just one. The revenge of the truth. The night of the anniversary arrived faster than I expected. During the 3 weeks prior, Arthur and I had prepared everything meticulously. Every document, every recording, every piece of proof was organized in folders he would bring to the restaurant. I barely slept, mentally rehearsing what I would say, how I would react, trying to prepare myself to see my son's betrayal manifest before my eyes. Ryan called me 2 days before the celebration. His voice sounded forced and cheerful, as if he were reading a script. Mom, Chloe and I are celebrating our anniversary on Saturday. We want you to come. It's going to be intimate, just close family. Close family? I asked, though I already knew the answer. Yes, you, Brenda, and a few of our friends. Nothing too big. Chloe reserved a nice place. You'll like it. I wanted to scream at him. I know what you're planning. I know you're going to take my house. But I held back. Arthur had advised me to stay calm, act normal, let them execute their plan so we could dismantle it with more force. I'll be there, I said simply. Perfect, Mom. And hey, I love you. You know that, right? Those words hurt more than any insult, because they were a lie. If he loved me, he wouldn't be planning to destroy me. I hung up without responding and cried for an hour. On Saturday, I dressed in my best clothes. A beige suit Margaret had given me 2 years prior, comfortable but elegant shoes, a pearl necklace that had belonged to my mother. I put on light makeup to hide the dark circles from sleepless nights. When I looked in the mirror, I saw a 62-year-old woman who had survived abandonment, widowhood, her sister's illness, and who was now preparing for the most important battle of her life. Arthur arrived to pick me up in his car. He had insisted on accompanying me, not just as my lawyer, but as a witness to what was about to happen. He carried a worn leather briefcase containing everything we needed. "Are you ready?" he asked me gently. "No," I answered honestly, "but let's go anyway." The restaurant was elegant, too elegant for my taste. Cream-colored walls with gold molding, crystal chandeliers hanging from the ceiling, tables covered in ivory tablecloths, the kind of place where each dish costs what I used to earn in a week when I worked. Chloe had chosen this place to impress, to show her status, to make the difference between her life and mine clear. When we entered, Ryan came to greet me. He gave me a quick, mechanical hug, the kind you give out of social obligation. "Mom, I'm so glad you came. This is a very special day for us." Chloe appeared behind him, radiant in her emerald green dress that must have cost a fortune. She kissed my cheek, leaving a coral lipstick mark that I had to discreetly wipe away. "Eleanor, you look great. What a nice suit." Her tone made it clear she thought the exact opposite. Brenda was already seated at the table, a glass of white wine in her hand, and that smile that made me want to run. "Cousin, come, sit here with me." She pointed to the chair next to her, strategically placed, so she could watch me throughout the dinner. Arthur sat across from me, his presence silent but comforting. Ryan looked at him curiously. "And you are?" "Arthur Miller," my lawyer said, extending his hand. "I'm a friend of the family. I knew Margaret for many years. Eleanor invited me to join her tonight. I hope it's not an inconvenience." I saw Brenda and Chloe exchange nervous glances. The presence of a lawyer was clearly not in their plans. But Ryan, always polite in public, smiled and said, "Of course not. Welcome." The dinner began with an uncomfortable normality. We ordered food that I barely touched because my stomach was tied in knots from anxiety. Brenda talked non-stop about a trip she had taken to Europe, bragging about every detail, every expensive hotel, every exclusive restaurant. Chloe followed her with stories from her work, about important clients, about glamorous events. It was as if they were competing for who had the most impressive life. I remained quiet, pushing the food around on my plate, feeling the moment I had been dreading and awaiting simultaneously drawing closer. Then Ryan ordered champagne. It arrived in an elegant bottle, probably costing $200 or more. We all toasted with glasses that sparkled under the crystal chandeliers. "To love," Ryan said, looking at Chloe with an adoration that seemed genuine. "To the 5 most wonderful years of my life." "To many more," Chloe replied, with a smile that didn't reach her eyes. We drank. The champagne tasted bitter in my mouth. And then the moment came. Ryan stood up, took that cream-colored envelope from his pocket, and spoke the words he had been rehearsing. "My love, these 5 years with you have been the best of my life. You are the most incredible woman I have ever met, and I want you to know that I will always take care of you, that you will always have a home with me." Brenda applauded with exaggerated enthusiasm. Other diners at nearby tables looked on with romantic smiles, thinking they were witnessing a beautiful moment. Ryan pulled out the keys. My keys. Copies of my apartment keys that he had made without my permission. "Honey, I made a copy of the apartment keys for you, so you'll always have a place to land, so that place can be ours." The restaurant seemed to fall into absolute silence. I could hear my own breathing, my heart pounding so hard I thought everyone could hear it. Chloe took the keys, her hands trembling slightly with excitement. Brenda hugged her as if she had just won the lottery. And then, on legs that barely supported me but with an iron will that Margaret had taught me, I stood up. Everyone turned to look at me. Ryan looked like a child caught doing something wrong but still hoping to get away with it. Chloe looked at me with barely concealed triumph. Brenda looked on with malicious curiosity, waiting to see me collapse. "What an interesting gift," I said, my voice sounding firmer than I felt inside. "Gifting something that doesn't belong to you. That requires a special level of audacity." "Mom," Ryan began to say in a condescending tone, "we can talk about this later. This isn't the place." "No," I interrupted, and the power in my voice surprised even me. "This is exactly the place. Because if we're going to make a public theater out of my life, then everyone should know the whole play." Arthur stood up next to me, opening his briefcase with deliberate movements. Ryan turned pale. Brenda set down her wine glass with a trembling hand. Chloe clung to the keys as if they were a life raft. "Ryan," I continued, feeling decades of pain, betrayal, and wounded love turning into words. "Those keys you just gifted are illegal copies of my apartment. The apartment that your Aunt Margaret left to me in a legal and irrevocable inheritance." "Mom, the will hasn't even been officially read yet," Ryan said, his voice trying to sound authoritative but breaking at the edges. "The will," Arthur spoke for the first time, his lawyer's voice filling the space. "Margaret Solis' will was executed 4 months ago, 3 weeks before her death, in my notary office. It is completely legal, registered, and sealed. And it clearly states that Eleanor is the sole beneficiary of all of Margaret's assets, including the apartment located at number 847 on Lincoln Avenue." The color drained from Brenda's face. Chloe dropped the keys on the table as if they were burning. Ryan froze, staring at Arthur as if he had just seen a ghost. "But that's not all," I continued, my voice gaining strength with every word. "Because, you see, Margaret was not a fool. She knew exactly what you were planning." "I don't know what you're talking about," Brenda said in a high-pitched, defensive voice. "No?" Arthur took out a small recording device and placed it on the table. "Shall we play the conversation from March 15th? The one where you discussed how you would declare Eleanor mentally incapacitated to steal her home? Or do you prefer the one from April 22nd, where you calculated how much money you'd have left after selling it and putting her in the cheapest nursing home you could find?" The silence that followed was absolute. Even the waiters had stopped, watching the scene unfold like a live soap opera. "I have a gift for you, too," I said, and my voice sounded like Margaret's in her best days, strong and just. "The gift of truth and consequences." Arthur took a slim laptop from his briefcase and placed it on the table, among the champagne glasses and half-eaten plates. His fingers trembled slightly as he opened it, not from nervousness, but from contained rage. He had cared for Margaret too, and what he was about to show hurt him as much as it hurt me. "Before I play this," he said in a professional voice laden with emotion, "I want everyone to know that what you are about to hear and see was recorded legally. Margaret never violated any privacy laws. Everything was documented in places she had a legal right to be, and the conversations were recorded because they involved crimes being planned against her sister. Ryan tried to stand up. "You have no right to." "Sit down," I ordered him, with an authority I didn't know I possessed. And, to my surprise, he obeyed. Something in my eyes, in my posture, made him understand that I was no longer the submissive mother he could manipulate. Arthur pressed play. The first recording filled the restaurant. He had connected the laptop to a small portable speaker so everyone could hear clearly. Ryan's voice echoed, and every word was like a hammer blow to my heart. "Brenda, listen to me. Mom can't live alone anymore. She's not capable. I called her the other day, and she sounded confused, forgetful. I think she's developing dementia or something. Chloe is right. We need to intervene before it's too late, before she does something dangerous." Brenda's voice replied with calculating enthusiasm. "Perfect, Ryan. If we can document those episodes of confusion, we'll have a legal basis to request a mandatory psychiatric evaluation. And once we have a diagnosis of mental incapacity, even a partial one, we can request legal guardianship over her and her assets." "And the apartment?" Ryan asked, his voice thick with barely disguised greed. "The apartment is the key to everything," Brenda replied. "It's worth at least $350,000 in the current market. Once we have legal control over Eleanor, we can sell it, arguing that we need the money to pay for her care in a suitable institution. No one will question it because it will look like we're doing what's best for her." Chloe then appeared on the recording, her voice sweet and venomous. "My love, I know this is hard for you, but think about our future. Think about the children we want to have. We can't start a family in a 2-bedroom rental. Your mother had her life. She made her decisions. It's not your responsibility to sacrifice our dreams because she wasted her opportunities marrying a failure who abandoned her." I watched Ryan shrink in his chair with every word. Other diners in the restaurant had discreetly moved closer, listening with expressions of horror and fascination. Brenda had tears streaming down her face, but not of regret, of pure panic. Chloe was staring at the laptop as if it were a poisonous snake. But Arthur wasn't finished. "That was the first recording," he said. "There are 17 more. 17 documented conversations where they plan every detail of how to rob Eleanor of her home, her dignity, her freedom." He played snippets of other recordings. In one, Brenda explained how she knew a corrupt psychiatrist who, for $5,000, would sign any diagnosis they needed. In another, Chloe described exactly what kind of facility they wanted for me. Something cheap, that has nurses but doesn't cost more than $1,200 a month. With what's left over from the apartment, we can live comfortably for years. In a particularly horrible recording, the three of them discussed what to do with Margaret's belongings. "It's all just old junk," Chloe said with disdain. "Used books, outdated furniture, photos nobody cares about. We'll donate it all or throw it away. It's not even worth the storage cost." "That old junk," I said in a broken voice, "was my sister's life. Her books that she read 100 times, the furniture she bought with money she saved for 30 years, the photographs of our childhood, of our parents, of every happy moment we had. To you, it was worthless. To me, it was everything." Chloe tried to defend herself. "Eleanor, this is all taken out of context. We were worried about you. We wanted what was best." "What was best?" I exploded, and all the rage from months of manipulation erupted. "Locking me in a cheap nursing home while you split $300,000 is what's best for me? Declaring me insane with false diagnoses is concern? Throwing away my sister's memories like trash is love?" Arthur raised his hand, asking me to be calm, though his eyes shone with approval. "There's more," he said simply, "the video." He turned the laptop toward the rest of the table and pressed play. Margaret's emaciated but furious face appeared on the screen. She wore a yellow scarf covering her bald head, and oxygen tubes ran into her nose. But her eyes burned with an intensity that made Brenda whimper audibly. "My name is Margaret Elena Solis." Margaret began in a weak but clear voice. "I am recording this on August 28th, 2 weeks before my projected death. I am of sound mind, as confirmed by the 3 doctors who signed this document I am holding. And I need to leave a record of a crime being planned against my sister, Eleanor. For the next 15 minutes, Margaret explained everything. How she had discovered the conspiracy, how she had recorded every conversation, how she had used her last savings to create an impenetrable legal trust to protect her sister. She showed documents, played audio clips, and named names with surgical precision. "Ryan," Margaret said, looking directly at the camera. And I watched my son shrink under that gaze, even through a screen. "I raised you as if you were my own son. I taught you to read. I took you to your first day of school. I comforted you when your father abandoned you. I told you that real men protect the women they love. And you promised me you would always take care of your mother. You broke that promise in the vilest way possible. You sold out for a house in the suburbs and a woman who isn't worth the dust under your mother's fingernails." Ryan was sobbing now, real tears streaming down his face. But Margaret wasn't done with him. "Brenda," the video continued, "you were always envious of what you couldn't buy. Dignity, genuine love, the respect of others. You thought stealing from your cousin would give you what you lack, but it will only make you what you've always been, an empty woman in expensive dresses." Brenda had hidden her face in her hands, but Arthur turned up the volume so she couldn't escape the words. "And Chloe," Margaret's voice turned to pure ice, "you are the worst of all because you have neither the excuse of blood nor history. You entered this family like a snake. You identified the weaknesses of a good but weak man and turned him into your puppet. You used his love against him, isolated him from his mother, and convinced him that betrayal was the right thing to do. You are a predator, and I hope these words haunt you every night when you close your eyes." The video ended with Margaret looking directly at the camera. "Eleanor, little sister, if you are seeing this, it means they tried to hurt you, and you had to fight back. I am proud of you. Never forget that you are stronger than you think, more valuable than they made you believe, and more loved than they can ever understand. The apartment is yours, legally protected in ways no corrupt lawyer can break. Live there, be happy, and never let anyone take your dignity. I love you with all my heart. Your sister, Margaret." The screen went black. The silence in the restaurant was so profound, I could hear my own ragged breathing. I looked around and saw tears in the eyes of strangers, waiters discreetly wiping their cheeks, the restaurant manager watching with a moved expression. Arthur closed the laptop with a definitive click. "Now," he said, his voice filling the space, "let's talk about the legal consequences. Conspiracy to commit fraud, attempted forgery of medical documents, planning the illegal appropriation of property. Each of these is a criminal offense that can result in jail time." "No," Ryan whispered in a broken voice. "Please, no." I looked at my son, at the man who had been my baby, my reason for going on after his father abandoned us, and I felt something break inside me. It wasn't hatred I felt. It was something worse, disappointment, so deep it hurt more than any betrayal. "You have one chance," I said finally. "One single way to prevent Arthur from presenting these documents to the authorities tomorrow morning. You are all going to listen to exactly what is going to happen now," I continued, "and you are going to accept every consequence without a single complaint." The days following the anniversary were a storm of emotions that almost destroyed me. I thought that after exposing the truth, after showing the proof, everything would end, and I could begin to heal. How naive I was. The war had just begun. Ryan called me at 6 o'clock in the morning the next day. I hadn't slept at all, still lying awake, staring at the apartment ceiling, reliving every moment of the confrontation in the restaurant. When I saw his name on my phone screen, my heart sped up. Maybe he was calling to apologize, to tell me he had come to his senses, that it had all been a terrible mistake. "Mom," his voice sounded different. Not repentant, but furious. "What the hell did you do last night? Do you have any idea of the humiliation you caused us?" Chloe won't stop crying. Her parents called, asking what kind of family we are. My friends who were there shared it on social media. There are videos of the whole thing circulating everywhere. I froze. "That's what you're worried about? Public embarrassment? Not the fact that you planned to steal my house?" "We weren't going to steal anything from you," he shouted, with a conviction that scared me because it seemed genuine, as if he truly believed his own lies. "We were going to take care of you, put you in a place where you'd be safe, where you'd have nurses and medical attention. But you turned it into something ugly, something criminal. Ryan, the recordings. The recordings are taken out of context. Aunt Margaret manipulated you, made you believe we were monsters when we just wanted to help. And now you, with your absurd revenge, you've destroyed my marriage, my reputation, my life. He hung up before I could respond. I sat on the edge of my bed, holding the phone, feeling the tears run down my face. So that's how it was going to be. He wasn't going to accept the blame. He was going to rewrite the entire story in his head until he convinced himself he was the victim. 2 hours later, Brenda appeared at my apartment door. She didn't ring the bell. She pounded on the door with fury, screaming my name in a hysterical voice. "Eleanor, open this damn door. We need to talk." I opened it because I knew she wouldn't leave, and because part of me, a masochistic, foolish part, still hoped she would admit what she had done. Brenda stormed in like a hurricane, her makeup streaked and her hair disheveled, so different from the perfectly put-together woman she always pretended to be. "Are you happy?" she screamed in my face. "Are you happy you've ruined me? My husband is furious, my children are ashamed, my friends won't answer my calls. All because you needed to play the victim." "I didn't play the victim, Brenda. You conspired to. We conspired to help you." Her voice cracked with tears and rage. "You're an old woman, alone, with no income. How long do you think you can keep this apartment? What are you going to do when you need money for food, for medicine, for emergencies? We were going to solve all that by selling it and making sure you had care until the end of your days." While keeping over $200,000 in the process, I said in a cold voice, "It was our right. I'm Margaret's family too. But she always preferred you. You were always her favorite, poor little Eleanor who needed to be rescued." Brenda spat venom with every word. "I worked hard my whole life, built something for myself, and never received a dime of help. And her? She leaves everything to you, who never did anything productive, who spent your life crying over a husband who left you 40 years ago." Her words hit me like punches, each one designed to hurt, to make me feel small and useless. And it was working. I felt doubt creeping into my mind. Was she right? Was I just a burden? Had I been selfish to cling to the apartment? "Get out of my house," I whispered. "Gladly," Brenda spat. "But this isn't over, Eleanor. I'm going to hire the best lawyer I can find. I'm going to fight that will. I'll prove that Margaret was under undue influence when she made it, that you manipulated her during her illness. And when I win, because I will win, I'm going to kick you out of here. And you'll end up exactly where you deserve, in a charity home." She left, slamming the door so hard it shook the walls. I collapsed onto the floor, hugging my knees, feeling all the courage I had gathered for the confrontation evaporate. I was alone, completely alone. My son hated me, my cousin was threatening me, and I had no one to turn to. Then my gaze fell on the photograph on the living room table. Margaret and I, when we were girls, hugging under the oak tree in our childhood yard. She was braiding my hair with pink ribbons, and we were both smiling with that pure happiness that only exists in childhood. I crawled to the table and picked up the photograph with trembling hands. On the back, in Margaret's handwriting, was a note I had never seen before. "Eleanor, 1968. The day I promised to always protect you. A promise I kept until my last breath. Now it's your turn to be strong. Not for me, but for you. Because you deserve to be happy. With all my love, M." I cried, holding that photograph for what felt like hours. But these tears were different. They weren't tears of defeat, but of determination. Margaret had fought for me even while dying, and I was going to give up because of threats from people who never loved me? I got up from the floor, washed my face, combed my hair. I called Arthur and told him everything. Ryan's call, Brenda's visit, the legal threats. "Let them try," Arthur said in a calm but firm voice. "The trust is impenetrable." Margaret made sure of that. "And if Brenda files a lawsuit, I will countersue for harassment, defamation, and I will make all the recordings public, not just snippets. Be ready to fight, Eleanor." I looked at the picture of Margaret and me, two little girls who didn't know how hard the world would be, but who had each other. "Yes," I replied. "I'm ready to fight." I didn't sleep that night, but not from fear. I was planning, thinking. remembering every lesson Margaret had taught me about dignity, about not letting abusers win, about defending oneself with intelligence instead of rage. And at dawn, as the sun came through the apartment window, illuminating the walls Margaret had painted, the shelves full of her books, the photographs of our life together, I knew exactly what I had to do. I wasn't just going to defend myself. I was going to honor my sister's memory in the most beautiful way possible. I was going to transform her last gift into something that helped others, something that proved that love always trumps selfishness. Margaret had left me the weapons. Now it was my turn to use them wisely. Arthur and I worked for 2 weeks preparing our legal response. It wasn't just going to be a defense. It would be a strategic counterattack that would make it clear I was not the confused old woman they wanted to paint me as, but a woman with all her rights protected and the truth on her side. Brenda followed through on her threat. 3 days after her furious visit to my apartment, I received a legal notice. She was suing to invalidate Margaret's will on the grounds of undue influence during terminal illness. She alleged that I had manipulated my sister, isolating her from the family, poisoning her mind against everyone while she was vulnerable and dying. She demanded that the apartment be declared part of the family estate and divided equally among all living relatives. When I read those documents, I felt a mixture of rage and something like hysterical laughter. Undue influence? Me, who had cleaned my sister's vomit after every chemotherapy session, who had held her hand during nights of unbearable pain, who had sacrificed 5 years of my life so she wouldn't die alone. I had manipulated her. While Brenda showed up once a month with cheap flowers and excuses for why she couldn't stay longer. "Perfect," Arthur said when I showed him the lawsuit, his smile like a shark smelling blood. "Now we can respond with everything." We filed a devastating countersuit, not just for Brenda's false accusations, but for conspiracy to commit fraud, attempted illegal appropriation of property, and harassment. We attached all the recordings, full transcripts of every conversation, Margaret's video, and testimonies from 3 doctors certifying that Margaret was in full possession of her mental faculties when she created the trust. But that wasn't all. Arthur had done something brilliant. He had tracked Brenda's financial movements for the last 6 months and discovered something revealing. She had been taking out loans against her own house, racking up credit card debt, living far beyond her means to maintain that image of a successful woman. She needed the money from the apartment desperately, not to help me, but to save her own financial situation. "She's emotionally and financially bankrupt," Arthur explained as he organized the documents. "That's why she's fighting so hard. It's not about family principles, it's about economic survival." We also discovered something about Chloe. Her public relations firm was being investigated for fraudulent practices, and she herself was under scrutiny. The videos of the restaurant confrontation, which had gone viral on social media, had put her in a terrible professional position. Several of her clients had dropped her, not wanting to be associated with someone publicly exposed for planning to abuse an elderly woman. Ryan appeared at my door a week after we filed the countersuit. This time, he wasn't yelling. He looked defeated, with deep dark circles under his eyes and wrinkled clothes. He was no longer the arrogant man from the restaurant, but someone who was finally facing the consequences of his actions. "Mom," he said in a broken voice, "I need to talk to you." I let him in, although every instinct screamed at me to shut the door. We sat in the living room, with miles of emotional distance between us that no furniture could bridge. "Chloe left me," he said finally. "She left 3 days ago. She said I was a coward, that if I had handled all this better, she wouldn't be losing her career. She blames me for everything." I waited for him to continue, not offering the comfort he was probably looking for. "And Brenda hired a lawyer who charged her a $15,000 retainer and is now telling her she has no case, that she's going to lose. She's furious, saying it's all my fault for giving her hope." Ryan rubbed his face with his hands. "My life is a disaster, Mom. I lost my wife. My friends won't talk to me. At work, everyone looks at me funny because the videos are everywhere. And the worst part is that I'm starting to understand that maybe I really did do something horrible. Maybe. The word came out of my mouth loaded with decades of pain. "What do you want me to say?" His voice rose. "That I'm a monster? That I'm worse than my father?" Chloe convinced me we were doing the right thing, that you needed professional help, that keeping the apartment was unsustainable for you. And Brenda showed me numbers, plans, told me it was for the best. And his voice broke. I wanted to believe them because it was easier than admitting I was being selfish. There was a long silence. Outside, birds sang in the park visible from the balcony. Life went on, indifferent to our family drama. Your Aunt Margaret loved you like a son, I said finally. She taught you every good thing you ever had. And she died knowing that you had betrayed her, that you had conspired to hurt the one person she loved most in the world. That's what you did, Ryan. Not maybe. You did it. I know, he whispered, and I don't know how to live with that. You'll have to learn. My voice was hard, but not cruel, because I also have to learn to live knowing that my son, the baby I carried, whom I raised alone after your father abandoned us, was willing to lock me in a cheap nursing home to buy himself a nice house. Ryan wept then, genuine tears from a man who finally understood the magnitude of what he had done. But I didn't console him. I didn't hug him. Because some wounds are so deep that healing requires more than tears and late-coming regret. I'm going to withdraw any support for Brenda's lawsuit, he said after he calmed down. I'll testify on your behalf if necessary. I'll tell the truth about everything. Don't do it for me, I replied. Do it because it's the right thing to do. Do it because it's what Aunt Margaret taught you. Do it so that when you look in the mirror, you can recognize even a small piece of the man you were supposed to be. He left shortly after. We didn't say goodbye with hugs or promises. He just left, carrying the weight of his decisions. 2 weeks later, Brenda withdrew the lawsuit. Her lawyer had explained that not only would she lose, but she could face criminal charges if she continued. Arthur received a formal letter from her legal representative, accepting that Margaret's will was valid and that there would be no further legal action. We won, Arthur told me over the phone, his voice full of satisfaction. But I didn't feel victorious. I felt tired, sad for what could have been and never would be. I had defended my home, yes. I had honored Margaret's memory, yes. But the cost had been losing my son at least, the son I thought I had. That night, sitting on the apartment balcony, watching the sunset paint the sky orange and violet, I made a decision. I wasn't just going to defend this place. I was going to transform it into something Margaret would have loved. Something that proved her last act of love had been worth it. I opened the letter Margaret had left me and read it for the 100th time, stopping on a line I had never fully processed. Use this place to do good, little sister. Make it a refuge for others like us, who need to know they aren't alone. And I knew exactly what to do. 6 months after that night in the restaurant, Margaret's apartment had been transformed into something I never imagined, but that she would have adored. With the help of Arthur, who turned out to be not only a brilliant lawyer but a true friend, I turned the space into a community gathering center for elderly women in the area. Every Tuesday and Thursday afternoon, the apartment filled with voices, laughter, and the aroma of freshly brewed coffee. Women in their 60s, 70s, and 80s came, many of them widows, some abandoned by their families, others simply alone. We shared stories, taught each other skills, and supported one another through difficult times. One woman called our group Margaret's Invincibles, and the name stuck. I used some of the small savings I had left to buy a heavy-duty sewing machine. I taught the women to mend clothes, to create beautiful things with their hands. Another woman in the group, a former teacher like Margaret, gave reading lessons to those who had never learned or who wanted to improve. We organized garage sales where we sold what we created, and we split the money among us or used it to help whoever needed it most. The room that had been Margaret's, I turned into a small library. Her books were now being read by dozens of hands, their margins filled with notes being shared with minds hungry for knowledge. On the wall, I hung her most beautiful photograph, where she smiled with that special light she had, and underneath, I put a plaque that read, Margaret Elena Solis, teacher, sister, protector. This space exists because of her love. Brenda never tried to contact me again. I heard through the grapevine that she had to sell her house, that she had moved into a small apartment, that her marriage was in trouble because of the debts. I didn't feel joy at her suffering, but I didn't feel compassion either. Some pains are so deep that forgiveness takes more time than one life offers. Chloe disappeared completely. Her company closed after the investigation, and from what someone told me, she had moved to another city, trying to rebuild her reputation. The keys that Ryan had given her that night, the keys to my apartment that she had held with such arrogance, were returned by mail without any note. I kept them in a drawer as a reminder of what I almost lost. Ryan. Ryan was the most complicated wound. He kept his promise to testify on my behalf, although it was never necessary because Brenda dropped the suit. He started going to therapy, or so he told me in one of the occasional emails he sent me. Brief, cautious emails, where he told me about his life, about how he was trying to be a better person, about how much he missed Aunt Margaret and how sorry he was for disappointing her. I replied to those emails, but with the emotional distance of someone speaking to a distant acquaintance, not her son. Because that relationship, that mother-son intimacy we once had, was broken in ways I didn't know if we could ever repair. Maybe with time, with years of consistent actions on his part, we could build something new. But it would never be what it was. One Tuesday afternoon, almost a year after the confrontation, a new woman came to the group. She looked to be about 65, well-dressed, but with eyes I recognized immediately, the eyes of someone who had been betrayed by her own family. She sat shyly in a corner, watching as the rest of us talked and laughed. I approached her with a cup of coffee. "Welcome. I'm Eleanor." "Norma," she replied in a soft voice. "My neighbor told me about this place. She said there were women here who understood what it's like to feel invisible." I sat down next to her. "Tell me your story, Norma," and she told it. A story different from mine in its details, but identical in its pain. Children who saw her as a burden, daughters-in-law who conspired to get her house, relatives who only appeared when they needed money. As she spoke, other women from the group gathered around, forming a circle, nodding in understanding, some with tears in their eyes, because we had all been there. "You are not alone," I said, taking her hand. "Here, none of us is alone. This is a safe place, created by a woman who understood that the greatest inheritance isn't money or property, but the love we leave behind and the protection we build for those who come after us." Norma cried then, and we all hugged her. And in that moment, looking around the apartment filled with women who had become my new family, I knew that Margaret would be proud. Not just because I had defended her gift, but because I had multiplied it, turning it into something bigger than just the two of us. That night, after everyone had left, I sat on the balcony as I did every evening. I held the photograph of Margaret and me under the oak tree, the two little girls who didn't know what life would bring, but who had each other. "I did it, little sister," I whispered to the wind. "I defended our home. And more than that, I made it a home for many, just as you would have wanted." The wind rustled the leaves of the trees in the park, and in my imagination, I heard her voice. "I always knew you were stronger than you thought, Eleanor. I am 68 years old now. My hair is completely gray. My hands have wrinkles that tell stories of survival. My son and I have a distant but existing relationship, slowly building something new on the ruins of what was. Financially, I live modestly but with dignity, on a small pension and the voluntary contributions from the women in the group who insist on helping with expenses. But I am happy, genuinely happy in a way I hadn't been in decades. Because I learned the most important lesson Margaret left me. True wealth is not in what you accumulate, but in what you share. Not in what you keep, but in what you give. Not in the blood that binds you to people, but in the love you choose to offer. Sometimes the family you are born with betrays you, but you can always build a new family with those who choose to truly love you. And that family, the one you choose, the one you build with intention and care, that is the one that remains. This apartment, these walls that Margaret painted, these floors that creak with our steps, became more than a refuge for me. They became a sanctuary for dozens of women who needed to know their lives still had value, that their age did not make them invisible, that they deserved dignity and respect. And every time a new woman crosses that threshold with wounded eyes and leaves hours later with a smile, I know that Margaret is smiling too, wherever she is. Because in the end, the greatest revenge against those who try to destroy you is not to return the harm. It is to build something so beautiful from the ashes of their betrayal that their darkness can never touch your light. That is the lesson I want to leave. Sometimes, the greatest inheritance we can receive is not material things, but the courage to defend what is ours, the wisdom to use our gifts in service of others, and the strength to remain good even when the world is cruel. Margaret gave me an apartment, but more importantly, she gave me the example of how to live with dignity until the very last breath. And that example, that lesson of unconditional love and fierce protection, is the true inheritance that I now share with every woman who walks through that door. Because in the end, we all deserve to be protected, valued, and loved. And if our own blood won't give us that, then we have the right and the power to build it for ourselves.